One. Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this is Taking Care of Business. Joining me today is Dustin Fuhs, who is co-editor-in-chief of Retail Insider, a national publication, online publication on the retail industry in Canada. Thanks for joining us today, Dustin.
No, it's great to be back.
All right, super. We're going to do something a little different that we did last week with Dustin. I'm going to turn the tables, and Dustin's going to ask me the questions from his perspective as an editor and my perspective as a journalist. We're going to talk about earned media versus paid media, or paid content. So, Dustin, take it away.
Awesome. So within the realm of our industry, we get a lot of pitches. We get thousands of pitches from organizations across Canada and the world wanting to get coverage. And media coverage is important because it allows you to tell your story. But what we're seeing is a blurred line from the perspective of the folks who are pitching, and they don't know, or they do know, and they're not given that opportunity to really decipher what is paid and what is earned media. And I think going into this discussion, it's important to set it up with what is earned media? What does that look like? And what does paid media look like?
Yeah, well, let me just start with talking about earned media. And it's a term, sort of jargon and lingo that is used in the communications and the public relations industry, and you know what? It's something that a lot of people don't understand. And you know, you go to Mario's Plumbing, and you're a communications company, and say, "Yeah, we can get some earned media for you." You know, Mario's Plumbing is going to look at you and go, "Huh? What does that mean?" So, in a nutshell, basically, earned media is something that appears in a media outlet, newspaper, TV, radio, as a quote unquote news story, costs nothing, right? So that's what a lot of these communications and public relations people are paid to do by companies and organizations, is to go get them, you know, into the media at a no cost. However, there is a cost, right? Because the cost for the company comes in hiring the communications and public relations people. What I find interesting now is that while in the past, this has been kind of like the traditional model of the relationship between the media and PR agencies, you know, it's changing, and it's changing dramatically for a number of reasons. And you know, the first and foremost is the fact that a lot of the media don't have the resources anymore to do a lot of stories. And I think also the media is becoming a little more, they're scrutinizing things more diligently these days on what exactly is a news story and what is not. I've had this discussion many times with business partners. All right, like here's an example. WestJet announces that they're flying to Timbuktu. The media does a story, right? And it's because it's considered a news story, but it's also promotion for the company, is it not, right? So that's where the line between what is editorial, straight editorial content is, and what paid, I guess, content would be.
Yeah, and we see it a lot with regards to organizations that are introducing a new product. You brought up the airlines. We can go across the platform and just say, you know, a digital company is launching in Canada. It's like, that's an amazing story, but are you shipping from the US? Did you just buy a .ca? Yeah. Are you like, where's that coming from? The other thing that we see a lot of is, how do we get earned media? And that's a really good question, because if an organization is used to paying for coverage, how do you change that from a here's X amount of dollars for a news story, where realistically we have to go the other way and say, well, here's how you put your PR spin to turn a paid article into a news earned article.
Yeah. And you know, the thing is, I think is a lot of businesses and in the communications area and public relations area have to understand that the landscape is changing in the media, right? You know, when you look at over the decades, right, that kind of business model of gaining earned media, you think of the lost revenue media companies have missed out on, you know, regarding you know, all these stories that they've written for free, basically, right? And so and here's the argument. Here's a kind of the argument that I get. I'm moving forward because the sun is shining in my eyes now. But here's the argument, right? That I have, and I've had this discussion with a lot of media or communications companies lately. Okay, so you're hired to pitch a story to a media outlet. You're getting paid. Okay, the media outlet may do a story that may not be, say, legitimately a news story. So the company that hired you in the beginning benefits. You benefit as a PR agency because you're getting paid by that company. What does the media get in this? Nothing. Absolutely nothing, right? And then you wonder why every media outlet, like the traditional media, whether it's newspapers like, you know, Post Media and television stations, are scrambling and just barely staying alive, especially in the newspaper industry, because they gave it away for free for so many years, right?
Yeah. And the other side of it is a lot of the organizations that you think of with regards to those community newspapers, they may not have had the digital setup or the wherewithal to go and get an ad network, because they may not have that kind of readership. There's a certain level within the digital landscape that a lot of these newspapers weren't created to actually fulfill. And I think that's why you see so many journalists that are, you know, going the way of the top 10 lists and the clickbaity things, because they know that those get clicks, those get eyeballs. Where if you do a traditional news story about something that's worthwhile, a lot of folks at this point are just so used to writing off of a press release and not going and getting the, you know, standing at a media event, being able to talk to someone and get that conversation, because that's just a different world right now.
You know what's interesting, you know, Dustin, is you know, when you look at the paid part of it, I'm finding more and more now that communications companies and PR agencies are exploring that route with certain media outlets. And you know what, the paid content thing has got different names over the years. It's you know, it's advertorials. In the old days, they used to be called advertorials. Now they're sponsored or paid content. But I'm finding the receptivity to that is much more positive these days, especially when they know that, this really isn't a news story, but it's just something that's blatantly promoting a company. And so they're exploring that. And you know, that's, you know, what runs through my mind often, right? And I scroll through all the business wires and the news wires every day, and I see the literally, you know, hundreds of media releases that are on there, and 99% of them are, you know, they're not really news, right? And I'm thinking, how much money is a company paying for that? Whereas they can just say, let's forget that, and let's, you know, we know nobody. Why waste our money on this when we know nobody in the media is going to pick that up and do it? Let's just go to the media and say, hey, Retail Insider, how much does it cost for us to get this story in your publication? Boom, done. And you know what? Here's the benefits of that, right? That the benefits of that is that you get it done. Okay. First of all, it is published. Okay. Second of all, it is published the way you want it published.
You get to tell your story, 100%.
You get to tell your story, and it's you know, it's not filtered in any way, because you know, if in my old days at the Calgary Herald, if you came to me and asked, you know, to do a story, Well, you don't know what the angle of that story is going to be. You don't know how much of the story it's going to be. It could be end up at a little brief as opposed to a story. You don't know
Yep.
what the headline is going to be. You don't know what photo is going to be chosen to go with it. So everything is totally out of control, and you're at the mercy of the media to tell that story right and in a fair and accurate way, and in a way that kind of pleases you. Whereas, as I said, if you go to the paid version of it, all those worries are set aside.
Now, is there something within the media? So when we're talking about pitches and we're working on a story, for example, for ABC Moving Company, and they are doing something that's unique and different, and we put our effort out there into an earned media piece. How does the media take it when they go to another publication and you see that it's actually a sponsored post with
Yeah.
another organization? How does that come through?
Well, that's a really interesting point, because I have seen that, right? And I've seen where stories that maybe I've written for some publication, appear as an advertorial somewhere else. But I don't know. I think the thing is, like, every publication is different, right? And every publication is looking at different stories that would fit and suit their publication, right? So I think this is where the paid content comes in, is that it's kind of a niche thing that is geared towards certain publications, certain markets, they hit certain demographics, all that type of stuff, and that's what I guess businesses have to look at, is that, okay, yeah, you could do the mass. If you have a story that reaches the masses, right, then yeah,
Yes.
okay, let's go out and we'll pay for it at the major daily newspaper in our city, right, type thing. But if it's not, but you want to reach a target audience, then maybe you have to pay for it and reach that target audience in that manner, right?
Yeah, and that's something that we're seeing a lot of, and it's the landscape is changing. And the example that I was thinking about when we were coming up with this idea is media just changes.
Oh,
Things are different. I remember when I did my first interview when I was 16 years old with a mayoral candidate out in Kamloops. And I went up, and as a journalism, like I loved politics, I loved everything, but I went up and I asked the question that I had written on a piece of paper. The candidate answered. I went to the next one down, candidate answered, and it was that type of thing. But now you're looking at journalists and people within the media having their own spin, and then having their own stories that they want to tell. And
yeah.
if the brands aren't wanting to put that kind of effort in on that side, then all of a sudden it's a lot of commentary with a quote or two from a source, and then it's a different spin for the story that the PR and the communications wanted to tell. They thought that they were going to be telling this positive story, but it turns into more of a commentary on the industry, and no one's happy because that's just the way that it was positioned.
Yeah.
So is that something going forward that communication teams are going to have to understand, that things aren't the way that they were in, the 80s, the 90s, 2000s? We're living in a digital age.
Yeah.
And because of that, earned versus paid is a topic that has to be discussed, and it's no longer taboo.
Well, you know what, and it's interesting you bring that up, because I often wonder, and I'm curious that I will ask at some point, whether all these universities and colleges that teach these communications courses, whether they're talking about this and how much of they're talking about this, right? And what's interesting too is that I'll take it. I won't. These next comments will be more for the mass media, right? The sort of the legacy traditional medias, the post media papers out there type thing. But you look at those paid content pieces now, the line between how they look is is almost blurred. It's very blurred, and that as a reader, I pick up my daily newspaper and I look at that story. It's hard to tell whether that's an actual news story or whether it's a paid story by the company. There are little things in place, there's, maybe some
the URL trackers.
yeah, in the print, say there's a little, the fonts are a little different, that type of stuff. And usually there is a little tagline, this is a partner content initiative, something like that. But those are subtle. They're very subtle now. And where in the past, I picked up on the newspaper that I could tell in a second that, oh, that story, Mario's Plumbing paid for that story, right? And which is fine, right? You know what? The key then becomes, and I, full disclosure, I do a lot of these for different publications. I do a lot of paid content, but I always tell people that, what is extremely important is that paid content, even if it's paid, has to be like a regular story. It cannot be a blatant promotional piece. It cannot be a blatant marketing piece with all the lingo and the jargon and buzzwords that marketing people use. But it has to be written in a sense that the reader looks at it and says, well, that looks like a regular story that would be in the paper. That is a key, I think, going forward for this earned media versus paid content stuff.
Yeah. Now, one of the future conversations that we'll definitely have is the training and on-the-job training that communications professionals are having right now, because everyone is remote. And because of that, you're not able to learn. So if someone is getting a job as a PR rep and they are, incredibly excited, they are basically told, okay, spray and pray, send out emails as often as you can. Don't worry about personalizing, just dear editor, to whom it may concern, that kind of thing. But I know there's an element to the paid and sponsored pieces that are completely different in a pitch than if you're wanting earned media. And I think that's going to be a really good conversation going forward, especially into 2022, talking about how PR professionals can learn on the job, even though they are remote. And honestly, it's about picking up the phone and talking to the editors and talking to the journalists and saying, what makes a compelling story? What makes something sponsored? Like if I look in an email, I can make a judge within a matter of probably 2 or 3 seconds. You read it, you're like, okay, sponsored or earned.
And you know what I often do is I look at it and then the same way, right, Dustin? I take a look and go, oh no, this isn't a news story. But I will suggest that to people. Okay, you know what? This is not really editorial content. It's more of a blatant, piece to get exposure for the company, right? Would you guys consider, paid content? And the reactions to that are kind of amusing sometimes, right? And, sometimes it's like, oh, really? Like, taken
like,
aback.
yeah, it's a multi-billion-dollar company.
I'm thinking, why would I write a blatant promotional piece for a company that's making hundreds of millions of dollars each year, and they can certainly afford it, right? I can understand if it's Joe and Millie's convenience store down the street.
Absolutely.
But for big companies and big corporations, that's peanuts to them, right? To get their message out. So sometimes that's the reaction, but a lot of times it's okay. Well, we'll go back to our client and ask. And I often wonder if they actually do go back to their client and ask, because that's what they were hired for in the first place, is to get that earned media, right?
No, absolutely. So what the takeaway from this conversation is that earned media is in fact a news story, and it's compelling for the readership, and it's compelling for the outlet that you are pitching. A paid, like an earned media, could be different for Retail Insider versus a BuzzFeed. completely different industries, but if you're pitching the same content for one organization, that could be an incredibly important news article. For another one, you may want to get into their platform with their readership, but it wouldn't be in the same world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right there. I think, as we move forward in this industry, both industries, media and public relations, this is going to be an increasing trend out there. And I think a lot of it has to do with the media landscape, as I mentioned before, the resources, the revenue. The revenue is huge, right? In terms of the problems the traditional media is having. So they're looking at different streams of generating revenue, and this is one of them, right? So I think communications and public relations companies have to learn to adapt to that, and have to learn to read the tea leaves out there, right? And see what's happening in the industry, and what would make a good earned media piece, and what would make a good paid content piece. And rather than lopping everything together and approaching Dustin Fuhs or approaching Mario Toneguzzi and with this as a news story initially, right?
Yeah, can you do this story on us? So, it'd be a favor for us. I'm like, yep, 100%. We get that every single day, and we do our best. Like, Canadian retail and Canadian businesses is always in need for growth and exposure, but we also want to make sure that we're able to, like, we've got salaries, we still have things that we have to cover.
That's the thing, right? That's the thing. Like these companies have to realize, well, you know what? We're working. Do you expect me to do something for free? Like, sometimes when it's just basically benefiting another company, it's like me, and it's funny. This is a little bit of an aside, but how often, because people know I'm in the media industry, right? So people who are friends or acquaintances, can you do a story on us? It would be really help. And I'm thinking, well, you're a plumber. Can you come over and fix my pipes for free?
But I went to school. I trained for this. I'm a tradesperson. I have insurance. I have a reputation to uphold.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. We're in the same boat.
That was great. Again, Dustin, we'll come up and maybe talk about that the next time. You talk about communications industry and how it looks going forward, especially with all the new kids. I say kids coming in; they're all kids to me, right? But I think that's a really important element. And you know what? Maybe even get a communications professor on to talk about that, or what are they teaching people that are wanting to go into this industry. So thanks a lot, Dustin, again for joining us today.
It was great to come on, and we'll chat soon.
All right, that was Dustin Fuhs, who is co-editor-in-chief of Retail Insider. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this is Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.